Have you ever stopped to think who would really save your life if one day everything suddenly fell apart? It was just another ordinary afternoon. A silent house, with wide windows, smelling of expensive perfume and loneliness. Claire Bennett, the cleaning lady, was mopping the living room floor, as she did every Tuesday. No one gave her a second glance. It was as if she were part of the furniture, invisible, functional, forgotten. But that day, she would be the only one who saw what really mattered. Lily Carter, the boss's daughter, a 6-year-old girl, sweet and lively like the morning sun, was playing alone in the kitchen. Jonathan Carter, the father, a millionaire, a widower, locked in a video meeting, distant as ever. And it was there, in a moment of carelessness, that the world almost stopped. A choking sound, a muffled noise, a breath that wouldn't come, and the silence that invaded that house screamed like never before. Claire dropped the bucket, ran barefoot, knelt down, with her heart racing. And, with trembling hands, she did what few would know how to do. She saved Lily with a first aid maneuver she learned years ago from some video on the internet. Her breathing returned, but Claire was still crying. She was crying because she had seen death up close. She was crying because she loved a child who wasn't even hers. She was crying because, in that moment, she knew something had changed forever. She wasn't just the cleaning lady. She was the most attentive heart of that house. The only love present when everyone else was too busy. And it was on that cold floor, with the child in her arms, that Claire stopped being invisible. At that exact moment, everything began to change. But what would come next, no one could have predicted. After all, what happens when love walks through the front door without asking permission? You are about to learn a story where destiny chose the unlikely to make the impossible happen. That house had no soul. Everything was too cold, too clean, too expensive. The white walls seemed to whisper that one should not speak loudly, laugh too much, or make mistakes there. It was a mansion made of glass, concrete, and absence. And in the center of this emptiness lived Jonathan Carter, successful businessman, widowed since the age of 38, father by obligation and man inside an armor that the world found admirable, but that, deep down, only hid pain. Jonathan didn't cry. He didn't smile. He didn't say good morning with his heart anymore. Since the death of Emily, his wife, the only one who made everything seem light, he chose not to feel anymore. He raised his daughter, Lily, with hands-on care and endless resources, but no presence. The little girl grew up surrounded by smart toys, private lessons, and glass walls, but no cuddling, no smell of a cake in the oven, no bedtime stories. That's when it appeared Claire Bennett. She arrived wearing simple sneakers, a faded blue blouse, and a low-key look, like someone who has heard too much and needs to explain herself. A single mother, living in a remote neighborhood, a user of public transportation and an expert at disappearing into her own silences. Claire didn't know what it was like to be noticed, but she knew exactly how to care. Care with gestures, with silence, with the calm of someone who has learned that no one needs much to feel seen. The first time Claire walked into the house, she took off her shoes at the door without being asked. She organized Lily's toys into labeled boxes. She washed the dishes as if she were praying. She folded Lily's clothes and left a handwritten note. The little socks are in the top drawer. And the teddy bears are under the pillow. Not even Jonathan saw that. But Lily did. And she kept them. Little by little, Claire became part of the scenery. But a comforting scenery. She was the only one who remembered which juice Lily liked the most. The only one who asked, with her eyes, if the girl had had a good day. And that was why, when everything happened, that choking, that despair, she was the one who reacted first. Because she was really there. With her body, with her soul, with love. Jonathan began to notice. First with strangeness, then with curiosity. Who was this woman who folded the clothes so carefully, as if each piece were an extension of his daughter's skin? Who was this stranger who prepared Lily's tea exactly the way Emily did? Who was this figure who said little but did so much? But Claire didn't talk about herself. She didn't talk about her overdue bills, or about her teenage son who was raising her alone. She didn't talk about her ex-husband who disappeared, or about the neighbor who lent her internet. She didn't expect anything. She only gave what she could: care, presence and a kind of love that doesn't demand anything, only gives. And Lily felt it. She started waiting for Claire at the door, asking her to help with her homework, showing her drawings that I made just for her. She started laughing more, sleeping better, letting her hair be brushed, something that I had previously rejected. Jonathan noticed that his daughter was happier, but he couldn't explain why. Until one day when he heard a half-spoken conversation coming from the bedroom. "Claire, are you ever leaving?" "I will, Lily. But only when you know you're not alone, even when I'm not around." It was like a silent punch to his heart. Claire wanted nothing, and yet, she gave everything. And, without even realizing it, the house was changing. The smell in the room was no longer just of industrial cleaning, it was of orange cake made with leftover ingredients from the pantry. The floor, which used to be cold, was now covered in small footprints mixed with simple slippers. The sound that could be heard from afar was no longer just the computer keyboard or the non-stop phone, but the light laughter of Lily telling stories to Claire while she cleaned the floor. The mansion began to feel alive, and Jonathan, even though he was reluctant, began to want to be more present. He started arriving earlier, listening better, looking at his daughter, and, occasionally, at Claire, as if he were beginning to remember what it was like to feel something beyond obligation. But there was still a whole world between them, a world of social differences, of judgments, of codes that he didn't know how to break. And, above all, there was the gaze of society, the weight of the Carter surname, the expectation that he would marry someone of his own standing, someone from the same social circle, someone worthy of his late wife's legacy. And that was exactly where the conflict began to grow. Claire, even without wanting to, was becoming too much a part of that house, and not everyone was willing to accept that. That Wednesday, the routine seemed to follow the same pattern as always. Jonathan was locked in his office with 2 cell phones, 3 screens, and no smile. His voice echoed coldly. Behind the frosted glass door, he talked about numbers, mergers, deadlines, investors. Outside, in the world he pretended to control, everything was predictable. But inside, in little Lily's universe, destiny was beginning to write a new paragraph, and he had no idea. Claire had lovingly prepared lunch, as usual. Baked sweet potatoes, loose rice, grilled chicken without any strong seasoning, all the way Lily ate best. The little girl loved helping, even if it was just washing the silverware or tidying up the folded napkin. That day, she sat at the kitchen counter while Claire told her a story about her oldest son, who loved to play superhero. Lily's eyes sparkled with curiosity and affection. The dish was served. The forkful came, a small piece of barely chewed chicken. And suddenly, the noise changed. The laughter turned to silence. The look turned to panic. Lily put her hands to her neck. She tried to cough. Nothing. Claire froze for less than a second. The time it takes for a heart to beat once. Then, it was all instinct. He ran. He took the girl in his arms. He felt her little body already going limp. And there, in the middle of the white marble kitchen, he knelt down. With shaking hands, he placed Lily on her back, wrapped his arms around the girl's torso, and began the maneuver. 1, 2, 3 compressions. The trapped breath seemed to refuse to return. Claire felt despair invade every pore. Kneeling on the floor, she whispered softly, "Come back, my love, come back, my love." 4, 5, 6. And then, a sound. A violent gasp. A sobbing cry. "Lily is back." Claire cried with her. She hugged her tightly, like only a mother knows how to hug her. Like someone who holds life with both arms and refuses to let go. Relief mixed with the fear that still ran down her eyes. She wasn't a nurse. She wasn't a nanny. She was just a cleaning lady, but she was the one who saved her. Jonathan heard the scream, the muffled sound of despair. He left the room, knocking over his chair, the phone still in his ear. The meeting paused. And when he arrived, what he saw was not his daughter in his arms. It was Claire, kneeling on the floor, sweaty, trembling, with Lily buried in her lap, as if she were his. He stopped. The world stopped. For a few seconds, he said nothing. He just looked. And there, in that heavy silence, he realized that he was facing something that no amount of money could buy. His daughter, the only thing that still mattered, had been saved not by a medical team, not by a certified nanny, but by a woman that society pretended not to see. An invisible woman, who at that moment, shone like no one else. Lily didn't want to let go of Claire. And Claire, even with her heart racing, still stroked the girl's back, as if she still needed to confirm that everything was okay. Jonathan tried to get closer, touched the maid's shoulder, and it was then that she turned around, her eyes full of tears, but firm, and said, in a low voice, "She's fine now." That was it. But the way she said it, Jonathan felt something break inside. It wasn't just gratitude. It was a kind of shame. A kind of belated recognition. He didn't even know how to react. The man used to dominating entire rooms, controlling international meetings, was left speechless in his own home. And inside, something began to change. That scene wouldn't leave his mind. Even after Lily was already sleeping peacefully, with a blanket that Claire had carefully arranged, even after. The kitchen was clean and the house was silent again. He stood in the hallway, watching Claire put things away as if nothing had happened. As if saving a life was part of his job. As if he didn't expect anything in return. Nothing other than the certainty that the girl was okay. That night, Jonathan didn't turn on his laptop. He didn't read reports. He stayed by his daughter's side, watching her breathe, trying to understand how he had let the essential things slip away for so long. And in the silence of that room, only one image occupied his mind: Claire, kneeling, with her eyes closed and the girl in her arms. And as much as he wanted to go back to his usual routine, something inside him told him that the world, from that moment on, would never be the same again. Because now he saw it, he felt it, and that, he couldn't ignore it. The next day, Claire arrived early. As always, only something had changed. She walked through the same door, with the same light step, the same faded blue blouse, but Lily's eyes darted to find her before she crossed the hall. And for the first time, the girl's voice rang out louder than any other voice in the house. "Aunt Claire." Jonathan heard it from upstairs. He hadn't remembered his daughter calling anyone so affectionately since Emily. It made his heart skip a beat. It was just one word, but it held the strength of a bond he hadn't even known existed. Lily would not let go of Claire. She wanted her to comb her hair before class. She wanted her to choose her outfit. She wanted her to put on her favorite pink bow. Claire did everything with a mother's delicacy. She combed her hair patiently, she made crooked but affectionate braids, she sang softly songs that her own mother had once taught her. Lily laughed, and when Claire said done, she looked at herself in the mirror as if she finally felt beautiful. The kitchen also changed. Jonathan, accustomed to cold, rushed coffees, now found the coffee maker already on and a porcelain mug on the counter. It wasn't the boss's thing, nor the assistant's. It was the touch of someone who observes, who feels, who offers without fanfare. One day, he tasted the coffee, and even without sugar, it tasted like home. The details began to accumulate like petals in a hidden garden. Claire began to tend to the dried plants on the balcony, which had not been watered for months. Soon, the greenery returned. The house dog, previously agitated and anxious, slept peacefully at her feet while she mopped the floor. The toys in the living room, previously scattered like leftovers of loneliness, were now carefully organized. Every corner of the house began to breathe differently. But it wasn't just the house that changed. Jonathan silently began to observe more. He stood in the doorway watching Claire teach Lily how to tie her sneakers. He watched from the window as the two of them talked in the garden, as if the world were just that patch of grass illuminated by the afternoon sun. He noticed that his daughter slept better on the days Claire was around, that her laughter was more relaxed, her eyes lighter. And he also realized that he himself missed her on the days Claire wasn't around. There was a discreet affection going on, a kind of love that doesn't ask for a stage, that only shows itself in silence, in small acts, in constant presence. Claire never asked for anything, nor did she raise her voice, but her absence, when it happened, screamed in the corners of that house. One morning, Lily drew a picture. It was of her, Claire, and their dog, all holding hands in a field of flowers. Jonathan saw the paper taped to the refrigerator, with the caption written in childish letters, "My beautiful family." He read it over and over. A lump rose in his throat. Because there was something there that he could not control, nor measure, nor buy. Something that was being born, even if he did not yet know its name. At school, Lily began asking every day if Claire would be the one picking her up. When it was someone else, she would pout. When she saw Claire coming, she would run with her arms open, as if she were running home. And on the walks to the gate, the two would hold hands, laughing at inside jokes, talking about the sky, the birds, the ants along the way. And others began to notice. The school coordinator commented, "Your employee has a rare connection with your daughter." And Jonathan, who always corrected employee to housekeeper, didn't correct her this time, because that word no longer fit Claire. She was more. She was an invisible bridge between what the house was and what it could be. But as always happens when love begins to take root where it shouldn't, at least according to the rules of the world, looks began to change. The old nannies, gracefully dismissed, whispered that Claire was wanting too much. Emily's mother, Lily's grandmother, noticed that her granddaughter talked more about the housekeeper than about her late mother. And that ignited something dangerous. But Claire had no idea. She continued with the same discreet look, the same delicate gestures. She put loving notes in Lily's lunchbox. She remembered to let her know about the test days. She prepared teas when the girl had a cold. She was present, she was caring, she was pure affection. And so, without asking for permission, she was transforming that home. And maybe now is the right time for you to tell me here in the comments, have you ever met someone who, without wanting anything, ended up offering everything? Have you ever experienced something like that, where love was revealed in the simplest detail? Share with me. I want to hear from you. And in the meantime, stay, because history still has a lot to show. Behind the silent transformation of that house, behind the laughter between Claire and Lily, behind the smell of new coffee and the plants that slowly bloomed, something began to boil silently. And it wasn't the kind of heat that warms up. It was the kind that burns slowly, hidden in the looks, in the whispered phrases, in the judgments varnished with good intentions. The old nannies, dismissed after years of convenience and routine, began to reappear in the social corridors. In clubs, in cafes, in mothers' groups, and with them came the comments. At first, they were small. "I heard Jonathan is getting pretty close to the new housekeeper. Funny, a cleaning lady having so much influence in a house like that. Did you see who's picking Lily up from school? Yeah, there's something going on there." And the meanness didn't have to be direct to do damage. Repetition was enough. Poison in gentle doses was enough. Lily's classmates' mothers whispered at school events. Some began to avoid conversation. Others just gave quick, uncomfortable glances when Claire showed up to pick up the girl. Claire, for her part, noticed, but she didn't react. She kept it all in the same place where she had kept for years: the looks of disdain at the grocery store, the polite rejections at job interviews, the invitations never extended to family parties. But in that world that Jonathan lived in, where surnames mattered more than gestures, Claire's constant presence began to bother people who felt like they owned the narrative. It was then that Margaret, Emily's mother, appeared. She was everything they expected of a Carter matriarch. Elegant, cool, punctual. She carried in her walk the nobility of the old generations. And when she entered her son-in-law's house for the first time in months, she was surprised by the smell of cake in the air. She was surprised by the live plants. She was surprised to hear Lily singing, freely, upstairs. But what bothered her the most was the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. Claire's laughter. Margaret watched as the maid served Lily juice, crouching down to the girl's level, the two of them smiling like mother and daughter. And something inside her froze. She waited for the first opportunity. She called Jonathan aside to speak to her in private. She said, softly but firmly, "Are you allowing my daughter's memory to be erased by a maid?" Jonathan tried to argue. He spoke of affection, of care, of gratitude. But Margaret wouldn't listen. She didn't want to hear about affection. She wanted to preserve a hierarchy. "That woman will never be part of our family, Jonathan. Never." People like her have their place, and it's not here. The sentence fell like broken glass. Claire was walking down the hall at that exact moment. She stopped. She heard everything. She said nothing. She just walked slowly downstairs, entered the back bathroom, and closed the door. There, in the muffled silence of the white tile, she collapsed. The pain wasn't new. It was familiar. It was old, but it hurt differently now. Because this time, she had allowed herself to cling. She had believed, even if silently, that a new place in the world could be born here. A new chance. She didn't want status. She didn't want a surname. She just wanted to continue being part of Lily's laughter. And now, that seemed too fragile. The sound of the pent-up crying echoed. Claire tried to hold it in, to wipe away her tears, to pull herself together. But outside, Lily was standing still. The girl had gone downstairs looking for her friend from every afternoon and saw the door closed. He heard the muffled voice. You didn't understand everything, but you understood enough. Claire opened the door and got a fright. Lily was there, sitting on the hallway floor, hugging her favorite teddy bear. Are you crying, Aunt Claire? Claire, her eyes still wet, tried to smile. I just got a little emotional, my love. Lily stood up, hugged Claire tightly, and whispered, You're the best thing in my house. I told my teacher I wish I had been born your daughter. Those words pierced Claire like a ray of light in the darkness. Upstairs, Jonathan heard it too. And for the first time in a long time, he felt ashamed, not of the maid, but of his silence in the face of Margaret's words. The house was changing, but the world around it didn't know how to deal with it yet. And that's when I want to know from you. Have you ever felt that, because of who you are, someone tried to stop you from belonging? Have you ever experienced that feeling of being judged just for where you came from, even though you were everything someone needed? Comment here. Your story matters, and this video is also a space for it to be heard, because the story between Claire, Lily, and Jonathan is still far from over. It was a rainy Friday, one of those days when the city seemed to want to remain silent. The traffic was slow. The streets were gray. Jonathan had a meeting out of town. Claire didn't pick Lily up from school that day. A new employee had been hired at Margaret's request, who was still insistent on putting things in order. Lily didn't say anything. She just looked down and held the drawing she had made for Claire, the two of them holding hands, the dog behind them, and a sun smiling in the sky. The school called around 3 in the afternoon. Mr. Carter, Lily's not here anymore. Did the person in charge pick her up? The secretary's voice was shaking. Jonathan froze. He said no. He asked them to call all the old babysitters, his grandmother, anyone. But no one knew anything. No one had seen her. No one had picked her up. A teacher found a note inside the girl's backpack, written in small, uncertain letters, but full of feeling. I don't want to lose my new friend. If she leaves, I'll leave too. It was like being punched in the chest. Jonathan left the meeting without finishing. He drove in silence, the steering wheel tightly in his hands. The world outside the car seemed distant. All he could think about was his daughter's eyes, the way she held Claire's hand, the way she smiled beside her, and how he had allowed that to be threatened. Claire learned of the disappearance when she received a call from the school number. The secretary's voice was heard over the sound of rain in the background. Lily's gone. Claire, she's not here anymore. For a moment, Claire felt the ground give way. But she didn't stop. She grabbed her coat, called her son to stay with the neighbor, and left. He didn't go home or to school. He went straight to the only place that made sense. A park tucked away in the old part of town. A simple space with no modern toys, but one that Lily said she loved because the grass smells different. It was there that they would sometimes sit on the wooden bench and watch the birds, while Claire told him stories from her childhood. And that's where she found it. Under the rusty slide, wet from head to toe, her arms curled up, her backpack clutched tightly to her chest. Lily was shaking. She was crying silently. But when she saw Claire, she gave a broken smile, a smile of relief and longing at the same time. Aunt Claire was all she could say, before running over and throwing herself into his arms. Claire wrapped her arms around her like the first time. She held her tightly, as if she were holding her heart back in her chest. "I'm here, my love. I'm here," Lily whispered. "I thought they were going to send you away. I don't want to be without you." Claire swallowed her tears, because now it was time to be strong. She picked up the girl, even though she was wet, even though she was heavy. And she stood there, in the middle of the park, like a mother who would never abandon what she loved. It was at this moment that Jonathan arrived. The car stopped abruptly in the middle of the lawn. He ran out, without an umbrella, his jacket soaking wet in seconds. He stopped when he saw the scene. Claire was there, hugging his daughter, protecting her, warming her, offering everything, without asking for anything. And there, in the middle of the rain, in the empty park, Jonathan saw the most real scene he had ever seen in his life. It wasn't about work. It wasn't about status. It was about love, genuine love. Love without contracts, without demands, without pretensions. Love that cares, that protects, that remains. Claire looked at him with teary eyes, but she didn't say anything. She didn't need to. It was all there. In the way Lily clung to her. In the way Claire held on tight, even as she trembled. Jonathan walked towards them, slowly, as if approaching something sacred. He stopped in front of them, looked his daughter in the eyes and said, "She's here. She's with you. And as long as you need her, she's not going anywhere." Claire closed her eyes. This wasn't just a promise for Lily. It was for her too. The rain continued to fall, but no one seemed to care anymore. The three of them stood there for a few seconds that seemed like an eternity. And for the first time, Jonathan understood. Claire hadn't just saved his daughter's life. She had saved what was left of his. The days after Lily's disappearance were like a quiet rebirth inside the house. There were no announcements. There were no speeches. But the air was different. Jonathan started waking up earlier. Not for meetings, but to make coffee while Claire brushed Lily's hair. The mornings, once marked by hurried silences, now carried hushed conversations, shy laughter, and the sound of an old radio playing a soft tune. Claire still arrived with her light steps, but no longer as an employee. There was a new respect in the air. A silent space that opened up for her. Not because she demanded it, but because it was carefully earned, day after day, presence after presence. She was still discreet, but there was something in her eyes that had not been there before. Belonging. And in Jonathan's eyes, something even rarer, recognition. The house now breathed differently. The walls, which had been too white, were now covered with tape, flowers in vases, and pillows that Claire had changed to warm colors. The dog no longer hid. He ran free, wagging his tail when the three of them were together in the living room. Lily seemed lighter, more confident. And Jonathan, well, he was learning to listen. To look people in the eyes, to feel. One afternoon, Margaret showed up unannounced. She had expected to find the same cool, controlled structure as always. Instead, she found Claire helping Lily with her homework on the couch. Jonathan was in the kitchen, making tea, and the living room was decorated with a new photo, something she had noticed from afar, with narrowed eyes. It was a simple image, Claire, Lily, and Jonathan, sitting under a tree in the park, smiling. A printed portrait in a handmade frame. It sat in the center of the living room cabinet. Margaret said nothing. She just looked, took a deep breath, and left with a curt nod. For the first time, she understood that there was something there that she couldn't control. And that maybe, she shouldn't. That same night, Claire was picking up her scattered toys when Jonathan walked into the room. His expression was calm, but his eyes shone with something restrained, as if he had finally found the courage to say what he had been holding inside for too long. "Claire," she turned around, still holding Lily's teddy bear. "Yes?" Jonathan swallowed hard. And then, with a choked voice, full of everything he never knew how to put into words, he said, "You don't work here. You belong here." Claire froze. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, it was deep. It was filled with everything they'd ever experienced together, without ever needing to name it. She smiled. A small, restrained smile. but full of truth. And it was at that moment, in that room that now smelled of coffee and childhood, that something was established between them. It wasn't a contract. It wasn't an easy romance. It was true affection. It was a bond. It was a new form of family, built without blood, but with soul. In the following days, small gestures sealed the new rhythm of the house. Jonathan began to accompany Lily to school, but always with Claire in the front seat. On Saturdays, the three of them would eat ice cream in the park. And on Sundays, Claire would cook and Jonathan would wash the dishes, half clumsy, half laughing, but completely present. The house was no longer a place to hide from pain. Now it was shelter. It was home. It was alive. The photo of the three of them remained on the living room furniture, next to a scented candle and an old photo frame of Emily, because she had never stopped being part of the story. But now, there was room for something new. Something that didn't replace, but transformed. And perhaps that is the greatest truth of this video. Because sometimes, it is not blood that defines who stays. It is the soul that chooses who remains, who cares, who loves. This was another story that proves, where there is truth, love always finds a way. This channel is made by those who feel, and continues with those who feel it together. Like, comment, and subscribe to experience more stories that prove, where there is truth, love always finds a way. Whoever has come this far has an open heart, so write in the comments, it is the soul that chooses the family. This simple gesture shows that you felt like you were with us, and that you are part of this community where every detail matters. And prepare your heart, the next story brings. The journey continues in the next video. And you are already in it.